Hello? Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be here. It was and continues, and even through everything that happened this morning, was my intention to always be here this morning. Some of you may know I had a little fender bender this morning. Everyone's safe, just surface stuff. You could check out the bumper in the car later if you want to. But I really am grateful to be here, holding the space and the intention to be here with you all. It got me here, so thank you. I am also just rejoicing at this topic, this discussion of forgiveness today. And one of the title of the talk is Peaceful Warrior's Most Effective Weapon, Forgiveness. And although we recognize on this path that there are many different walks on this path, that there are many ways of getting to a place of peace, of understanding, of reconciliation, of healing, of recognizing our wholeness and unity. I would suggest and offer that forgiveness is one of the most deep and powerful ways to accomplish such. And so I start really with, since we're in the season of thankfulness and gratitude, and in the native tradition, this is the celebration of the squash harvest, to start really with a proverb from the people that were originally on this land. And their proverb is that the greatest strength is gentleness. That our greatest strength comes from our vulnerability, our gentleness, our kindness, our compassion. And that flourishes into so many things, and it is indeed that we reap what we sow. That our way of being gentle in the world and knowing and recognizing that that is our strength shows up throughout in our relationships, in the ways we respond to each other, to the misgivings, the pain, the hurt, and frankly, the choices that we get to make moment by moment as to how to respond and be when life comes our way. So this is truly an inward journey of the heart and a way of being in the world, and how forgiveness just accompanies us and is a perspective, a choice, and a gift to ourselves and the world at large. So I stand here really in no place of authority. If you were on the highway with me 3 hours ago, you would know that. Because it is always a work in progress. And I certainly on the drive here got to talk myself through forgiveness work too. Because I know it's a process and it is continually unfolding. We start usually at One Spirit Interfaith Seminary when we train ministers. And I do the same here because we are all in a way serving the greatest good, so there really is no distinction other than these words and titles we throw about. I stand with and start with a Hafiz poem. He said and wrote, "Once a young woman said to me, 'Hafiz, what is the sign of someone who knows God?' I became very quiet and looked deep into her eyes, then replied, 'My dear, they have dropped the knife. Someone who knows God has dropped the cruel knife that most so often use upon their tender selves and others. Someone who knows God has dropped the cruel knife that most so often use upon their tender selves and others. Our greatest strength is our gentleness.'" I think in that profound Hafiz poem there's so many little seeds of truth. And so today I just want to plant a couple because, as we said, we reap what we sow. The first, I think, real major gift and real, I don't know what word to use anymore. It is a gift. What forgiveness offers us is an invitation to be who we are and who we truly are. So we can get wrapped up in the momentary story and the reaction instead of the response. But forgiveness and just beginning that conversation of saying, how do I let this go? How do I make peace with this? Or even being curious about, can I even make sense or get an understanding around something like this? All of those are invitations and pathways for us to say, who am I truly? And maybe not I in the small sense, but in the larger conversation to say, it's a we. How am I united, one with spirit, one with the people around me? And starting with small circles and just growing and growing. Maybe it's easier with the ones you love, the Tonglen Buddhist practice. Breathe in and out compassion and love for those that you love and hold dear, for those that you are neutral with, for those that drive you up a wall, for those you're trying to forgive, just trying to breathe through that. And in expanding that circle, really re-inviting the truth of who we are, which is one. We're all one. And it starts, though, with this one doing the work. I also offer that our language sometimes can be just a great little hint. Well, beyond a hint, maybe. We were using, and I heard, this morning some of the prayers, and I use it often too. We have misgivings. And at the same time, we're talking about forgiving. I just want to take the words apart a little slightly and see what forgiveness is about. And I would offer that its biggest piece in terms of inviting us to be who we are, it is inviting and propelling us to give more of who we are. It is for giving of ourselves that we go through this process. It is for our greatest unfolding and revelation. And when we withhold, the curiosity is, what are we holding? Is it that knife? Is it that knife against ourselves or others? Are we being warriors of peace in that moment, or of violence, subtle as it may be, or self-inflicted? So remembering the deepest part of who we are is what really forgiveness calls us for. I haven't even started talking about the process of forgiveness. That is a multi-life conversation. All I'm offering today is perhaps just seeing forgiveness differently. Sometimes I know for me, I think of it as, God, that's a lot of work. Here we go again. Or perhaps it's seen as a chore. And what I offer is that, yes, maybe it is a chore, but it has all of these gifts that it gives us. And one of them is the ability to really unfold, give more of ourselves, get out of our own way, and really remember who we truly are. In the Buddhist practice, there's a teacher, Pema Chodron, who sees forgiveness as a path to freshness. That if you want a new life, you want to experience the freshness of right now, that some of the decluttering that we must do is the forgiveness work. But it starts very simply. There's a simple practice, she says, that we can do to cultivate forgiveness. First, we acknowledge what we feel. We're not even in this divine, spiritual bypass world, whatever you want to call it, where we are thinking about what we should be doing, but we are thoroughly connected to our humanity. First, we acknowledge what we feel. She says, shame, revenge, embarrassment, remorse. And we practice forgiveness there and forgive ourselves for being human. Sometimes we don't get meta about this, and we might bypass the idea of just acknowledging where we are, feeling the fullness of what is going on so as to enable and launch you off into this greater unfolding, this forgiveness work. And I don't conflate forgiveness with understanding or condoning or frankly even accepting. There are some things that have occurred in this world where I think many of us would struggle to say, I even accept that. But it is certainly a beginning to start with our humanity and to acknowledge what we truly feel and allow ourselves and forgive ourselves for being right where we are. And to recognize once again, are we holding the knife? What is in our hands? What are we withholding What are we putting out there for giving? Pema continues, then in a spirit of not wallowing in that pain, we let go and make a fresh start. A fresh start. Here's an invitation. I know I use it for me quite often. When I'm stuck or feeling that something just keeps repeating, I get very curious about where I may have some forgiveness work to do. And it could be very small and subtle, or it could be just a belief system that I thoroughly, bought into and subscribed from my childhood and have to reconcile or redress or just decide that agreement which has served me so well no longer works. But in order to invite freshness, something new into our lives, forgiveness is one of the most profound tools that a warrior of peace can employ. She says the potential is inherent in every moment. Each moment is an opportunity to make a fresh start. So, do we want freshness? Do we want something new? Not necessarily just for newness' sake, but perhaps for our greater unfolding, for more life expressing through us, for this great generosity that is of life, that we celebrate in this season, that we're so grateful for, knowing that it is just ever flowing and ever growing within each of us. And this is where I think forgiveness work has the second big gift that I want to talk about today. It is a restorative power. It brings us back to our wholeness. Not that we ever were not whole, but we can totally forget and be separated and have false beliefs around separation. If we look at the work in South Africa, there was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I was in my research for this talk today, I'm continually moved by the work that Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela did. And I looked and at the top, it didn't really talk about the commission, but it said restorative justice. That it was about restoration, it was about reuniting, reconnecting. And the second piece that struck me was the word justice. That in practicing forgiveness, we are, in essence, inviting a justice into our lives, our own experience with each other and ourselves, a sense of fairness and due diligence in which we show up for ourselves and do the work so that we may be just and fair in how we live our lives, how we see ourselves. So in the moments where forgiveness may seem like an empty amount of work, or perhaps it just feels mucky or yucky or whatever we have judgment around it, I just offer you to reconnect to the idea that this is restoration work. This is making a mutual sheaf out of all these little things that seem so disparate and separated. And yes, I know it's lovely to get stuck in our stories. We set up camp, we redecorate, we invite friends over, we tell that story, we juice it up. I'm watching myself tell about my issues this morning and pacing myself. And that is part of our humanity that we can forgive, as Pema said. And at one point or another, we've grown out of that story, or it stops working for us. But we can always be gentle and put the knife down for the time that that story does work for us. And just be kind and compassionate then. And then in the change, be kind and compassionate too. So in forgiveness, in having it restore us, forgiveness does more than just quote unquote big picture restore us. It invites so many of these fine qualities of more life into our lives. So the idea of curiosity, just asking the question, forgiveness does that. It also invites in us that deep wellspring of compassion that may seem beyond the I, the one person just standing here. It connects us into something greater than ourselves. In the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there were families that had members killed. And in one particular story, a woman adopted the soldier that killed her son. And I think how profound that is. So beyond curiosity and her wanting to understand him, she actually gave more to her life and to his life through the process of forgiveness. And it sure was messy. I don't want to oversimplify, and I know I am. This idea of understanding never really came, nor did acceptance. But some grace came amongst them all, and it worked. It worked and did the work. So the third gift for us really is that we don't necessarily have to be the ones doing the work. That there is this astounding capacity when we let go, the let go and let God piece. That something does the work that is beyond us, but that reconnects us. That's the third gift, that forgiveness not only restores, but it enriches. It deepens, it finds meaning when there is no meaning. Again, not the same as understanding. You can forgive completely without complete understanding. And find the gifts. Nelson Mandela said, as I walked out the door towards the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew that if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison. Forgiveness liberates the soul. It removes fear. That's why it's such a powerful weapon. So, through my tears, through perhaps yours, we know that our greatest strength is our gentleness. That vulnerability is our way of availing ourselves to life. And that life's gifts to us sometimes show up as these difficulties, as these transgressions, as these hurts that require us to engage, deepen ourselves, enrich ourselves, and restore ourselves. Back, not that we ever really left, but back home to the truth of who we are. That we are one, that we are love, that heartbreak is part of love and life. And for that, we can be in this season very grateful. So it is. Amen.